America is entering a moment unlike anything in recent memory. For decades, the middle class was the backbone of a nation built on upward momentum, the belief that if you worked hard, you rise. If you saved, you'd buy a home. If you took risks, you'd climb a little higher. But today, something deeper is shifting. The numbers, the mood, the politics, all of it points to a country where the middle class is no longer dreaming upward. It's simply trying not to drown. To understand why, you have to look at three forces colliding at the same time. The new economic reality, the slowdown in immigration, and the political regime shaping both. And when these forces meet, you get a nation drifting into low mobility, low confidence, and low desire. Not because people don't want more, but because they no longer believe more is possible. The economic squeeze on the middle, relentless and silent. The latest numbers tell the story clearly. Real household incomes for typical American families have barely moved in the last several years. In fact, after adjusting for inflation, many households are earning roughly what they earned in 2019. 5 years gone and no forward progress. Yet the cost of living didn't stay still. It raced upward. Housing is the clearest example. In many cities, the cost of a starter home has risen 30% to 50% in just a few years. Interest rates doubled. Insurance costs spiked. Property taxes followed. A generation that once expected to build wealth through homeownership now feels locked out of it. It's not just housing. Healthcare premiums, childcare, groceries, utilities, everything essential is more expensive and wages haven't kept pace. And when the math stops working, people stop dreaming. They conserve, they freeze, they live defensively. This is the core of the American middle-class crisis. You can't desire more when you can barely afford the basics. A slowing nation, low immigration, low population growth. For most of American history, population growth was a hidden economic engine. Immigrants filled the workforce, started businesses, bought homes, and kept the economic bloodstream circulating. But now immigration is dropping sharply. Policy restrictions, tighter border controls, slowed processing, and a political culture increasingly hostile toward newcomers have dramatically reduced the flow of people into the country. The consequences ripple through everything. A shrinking inflow of workers means fewer young laborers, fewer consumers, fewer taxpayers, fewer entrepreneurs. It means slower GDP growth. It means less job creation. It means fewer new small businesses, the kind that traditionally hired middle-class workers. Demographers warn that America is approaching the slowest population growth rate in its modern history, and this is exactly the stage where economic dynamism starts to weaken. Low immigration does not just affect the border. It affects the economy's temperature, and right now the temperature is cooling. And when growth slows, opportunities slow with it. For the middle class, that means fewer promotions, fewer openings, fewer ladders to climb. It means the competition for good jobs becomes fiercer while the number of good jobs shrinks. Again, desire fades not out of laziness, but because the lanes for upward movement are narrowing. The political regime and how it shapes the pressure cooker. America's current political climate is defined by polarization and economic defensiveness. Policy decisions, from immigration restrictions to budget cuts to the restructuring of social programs, are reshaping the middle-class experience in real time. A government's priorities always reveal who it believes should carry the heaviest burden. Right now, the middle class is carrying more than ever. Cuts to social assistance mean families facing medical emergencies or job losses have fewer safety nets. Tax structures increasingly reward capital over labor, meaning those with assets grow wealth faster than those with wages. Regulatory instability makes small businesses cautious, reducing hiring. Trade tensions raise prices for American consumers and reduce export opportunities for American workers. And perhaps the most damaging effect is psychological. When a political regime broadcasts that scarcity is the new normal, when it elevates fear over futures, when it talks more about protection than progress, people internalize that message. They stop believing the world ahead will be better. They stop trusting that effort leads somewhere. They stop imagining a higher rung on the ladder. And when belief collapses, desire collapses with it. A middle class drifting into low desire. The American dream has always been built on motion. The idea that you can start somewhere and end somewhere else. But lately, the middle class feels immobilized. People aren't buying big homes. They aren't taking the same entrepreneurial risks. They aren't moving across states for opportunity at the same rate. They aren't having children in the same numbers. When generations stop expanding their lives, the country stops expanding its potential. This is the real crisis. America isn't just becoming economically unstable, it's becoming psychologically stalled. A society where people lose the desire to climb is a society losing its momentum. Not because ambition disappeared, but because systems stopped rewarding it. The fight for the middle class is the fight for America. If the country wants to reverse this trend, this quiet drift into low desire, it must confront all three forces at once. Fix the economic imbalance so that wages and costs reconnect with reality. Reform immigration not as a political trophy, but as an economic necessity. Build political conditions that restore optimism instead of eroding it. If not, America risks becoming something it has never been. A nation where the middle class no longer dreams upward. A country that stops believing in tomorrow. A society whose greatest danger isn't collapse, but stagnation. The question now is not whether America can recover. The question is whether it wants to. Because the future belongs not to the strongest nation, but to the nation that still desires to grow. But the story doesn't end there. The middle class is not just being pressured, it's being reshaped into something unrecognizable. The America that once believed every generation would do better is now witnessing the opposite. A slow erosion of expectations, confidence, and momentum. Today, the average American worker is more educated than ever, more productive than ever, and yet more financially insecure than ever. Productivity has risen dramatically over the last 30 years, but median wages have not followed. That gap, the gap between what people contribute and what they earn, is the fog that now surrounds the middle class. And inside that fog, desire doesn't die all at once. It fades quietly. It dims with every bill that arrives too fast. With every promotion that never materializes. With every political promise that dissolves the moment it's spoken. With every headline reminding people that the cost of everything is rising, except their sense of stability. Think about the psychological toll. People used to take pride in their work. Now they take pride in surviving another month. Families used to plan for the future. Now they plan around debt. Young adults used to dream of homes and children. Now they delay both, not out of freedom, but out of fear. This is what happens when a nation's middle collapses. Ambition becomes a luxury, not a birthright, and immigration plays a critical role in this shift. For decades, immigrants fueled entrepreneurship at a higher rate than native-born citizens. They started small businesses, stabilized industries, and filled essential labor gaps. When that inflow slows, the cracks appear everywhere. Fewer new restaurants, shops, and service businesses. Fewer construction crews. Fewer caregivers. Fewer engineers. Fewer innovators coming through the system. A slowed immigration cycle is like reducing oxygen in a room. Everything becomes heavier, slower, harder. Growth doesn't stop overnight, but it stops feeling alive. And then there is the political climate, a force that weighs not only on the economy, but on the national psyche. A regime defined by division, suspicion, and short-term thinking creates a society where people cling to stability instead of reaching for progress. When leaders focus on punishment instead of possibility. When policies prioritize walls instead of windows. When national conversations revolve around fear instead of opportunity. The ripple effect lands hardest on the middle class. Because the wealthy can insulate themselves, and the poor already know instability, but the middle is where hope either thrives or collapses. Right now, it's collapsing. The middle class is exhausted, not because it is weak, but because it is carrying the weight of an entire system that no longer lifts with it. It sacrifices the most, benefits the least, and is blamed the quickest. It works the longest hours, pays the highest percentage of income in taxes, and receives the smallest safety net. And beneath that burden, the old American rhythm, work, save, grow, is breaking down. When a nation's middle class loses its momentum, the country loses its identity. Because America was never defined by its elites or its extremes. It was defined by people who believed tomorrow could be bigger than today. But what happens when that belief fades? What happens when the American dream becomes something people whisper about, not something they live? You get what we're seeing now. A society where consumer confidence remains fragile. A housing market where ownership feels like a lottery win, not a milestone. A workforce where burnout is normal and mobility is shrinking. A political landscape where polarization replaces progress. A younger generation more pessimistic than any recorded in decades. This is not just economic decline. It's spiritual decline, the slow dimming of a nation's ambition. And yet America's story isn't finished. The middle class isn't beyond repair. The engine can still restart, but not without acknowledging the reality. A nation cannot rise when its middle cannot breathe. It cannot grow when its people fear the future. It cannot prosper when desire collapses under the weight of survival. And right now, Desire is the most endangered resource in the United States.